So welcome to Reframing ISO 9001 in 2015. We're here today to talk about how your organization can benefit from the ISO Easy approach. Let's do some introductions to get this going and a little bit of an ISO Easy overview. So ISO Easy is an approach that's been designed by a team of specialists with senior management, financial, compliance, and operations experience. Presenting today, we've got Harold Cavallaro. Harold, you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Well, hi, Andy. Thank you for allowing me to join you today. I'm looking forward to this presentation. I've got years and years of both manufacturing and operations experience, and looking forward to having this conversation about ISO with you. Really looking forward to it.
Excellent. And I'm Andy Quinn, and I have experience both in the corporate education and operations space, and we're really looking forward to this discussion. So we're going to review, first of all, what we'll be covering today. So our talking points are going to be to look back at ISO 2008, and as we go through this presentation, just for shortcuts, we're not saying ISO 9001 2008 and ISO 9001 2015. We're just using the shortcut of 2008 or 2015. We're going to look today at the ISO 2015 standard. We're looking at how companies transition to the new ISO 2015 standard, especially if they want to follow the ISO Easy way. And then we'll go through some summary and next steps. Sound good?
Sounds good to me, Andy. Let's do it.
All right. So first, let's talk about what ISO's done for your organization. And Harold, we've talked to a lot of clients. You've talked to an awful lot of clients. What have you found people are saying about what they've benefited from ISO 2008?
Well, there's quite a bit here, Andy, as you look at what we've got offered on the screen today. First of all, the quality department, really did go out of their way to create the standards that they have been implemented in a lot of cases, and it has helped improve both the processes and the product over time. So it's not like this was a wasted effort at all. The other thing is that, by using ISO, it allows you to create the different standards that the organization can use. It helps to validate not only the internal processes, but clearly the processes we can use for both our suppliers, and that's the suppliers feeding us, as well as outside processes. And also looking up the supply chain and to the customers ourselves. The other thing it helps us do is create awareness of some of the critical business documentation that's needed. Whether you're doing candy bars or jet engines, you're either in the food or the aerospace industry, there are certain standards you have to stick with, and this does help you stay on top of that documentation. The other thing it helps is, in some cases, helps actually make an awareness of some of the complexities that we face within manufacturing itself, and I think that's important. It also helps provide value with the regulatory process itself. I mean, that approval forces the organization to go through what they need to go through. And as I step back, Andy, and I think about this, there's really three different types of companies. All right, and the first group, those people who just check the box. They're doing it because they have to. So they're going through the process, but it's kind of just step by step. Then there's the companies that actually do this and take it serious. And these are the people that actually realize the benefits. The third group, these are the group that are kind of stuck in between. They're checking off the boxes and they're trying to get the results, but they're just not getting everything out of the whole ISO process that they'd like to, even though they're trying. So that's kind of the feedback, Andy, that we've heard, over the last couple of years.
Right, and so this probably is a good transition to talk about why ISO was revised. So, especially that sort of group that has not been able to maximize benefit. What are some of the things that they've seen with ISO 2008?
Well, first of all, looking back at that effort, typically, the quote is, yeah, that's the quality department. That's their job. And so if we look at the organization as being very siloed, anything has to do with quality, anything has to do with a problem on the shop floor, it's the quality. Whether it's got to be over in the MRB crib, whatever, it's their responsibility. So we sort of kind of pigeonholed this into one area of the company. The second is that in some organizations, they're more concerned about what's on paper. Did we check the box again from the previous conversation, versus how does that really affect us in manufacturing on a day-to-day basis from a production point of view? If in fact we've created a quality standard, we should be following that quality standard, quite frankly. The other comment is, yeah, it takes too long to get certified and it's too expensive. Well, yes, it takes a certain amount of time and effort, and depending on how you approach it, it can obviously create some cost. But if you do it correctly, there's obviously the benefits. The other is people said, you know what, it's a very complex process. And again, yes, it is. It's as complex as you make it out to be. All right, I agree that in some industries there is a level of complexity, but you need that if you want to get the certification. It goes without saying. And the last part there is, I expected to win some business. I put it on my website that I'm ISO certified, and I just thought that was going to be a leg up. Just putting it on your website doesn't really get you where you need to be. All right, you need to actually be actively involved in doing, the improvements in the quality area in order to gain the benefits. That's the only way it becomes differentiating. I don't know if that makes any sense, Andy.
It does. You and I've talked about this before. Part of the reason I was excited about this is I've had the opportunity to work with a nonprofit group that originally got certified 10 years ago for its processes, and it was really a check-the-box exercise. On recertification 5 years ago, we integrated it so it was part of the business process of the company, and so certification was easier. Now it's part of the quarterly review of the company. It's part of the DNA of the company, and it really makes for a dynamic business environment. So that's what I think we're excited about, this new ISO Easy approach, is we're trying to help bring that forward.
Well, it sounds like they put in the effort and they got the benefit that they needed to get. That's
exactly.
good.
So let's talk about ISO 9001 2015, what's out and what's in, because I think this is an important area that, as we've looked at ISO Easy, that we want to make sure we identify and provide value to people.
Okay. Well, some of this is going to sound redundant, but it's worth going over again. Okay, what's out? It's not just about the quality manual, and it's not just about physically creating the documentation so I can say to the auditor, look, I did it. Okay, it's moving it a step up, if you will, in involvement. It's using what we're talking about here is called process-based thinking. In other words, making sure the organization is thinking about the overall quality process, and so it is actually being used on a day-to-day basis. All right. The second point there, evidence-based. In the new standards, you actually have to prove, that you've made these changes, and you have to give evidence that the changes are taking effect. In addition to that, they've upped the standards now in terms of how much communication and correspondence has to take place within the organization. So, from that perspective, it's taking you out of just being the manual and moving it, to a whole new thinking process. The second thing is that it's not just at the operational level. Okay, again, this pigeonhole, this silo perspective. It's moving it up to what we're calling strategic thinking and risk management. In other words, looking at the quality aspect of it at a higher level in the organization, making sure that it becomes part of the strategic initiatives, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more. And we do evaluate the risk of doing certain things the right way. All right. In addition to that, truly spending some time capturing the organizational knowledge, the tribal knowledge, if you will, to make sure that, all the improvements actually stick. The third point there, ISO living alone in the quality management system, okay? And the system here is not just the software solution, this is the overall overreaching system, if you will. What we're talking about here in the new version is that the senior leadership of the organization has to be involved. This is a company-wide engagement, even as far as, potentially running it all the way up to the boardroom, we don't say that just jokingly, to where the involvement needs to take place to make sure that the overall implementation has meaning within the organization. The last piece there, applicable only to existing products, okay? They've taken it a step further. All right, let's also apply this whole new thinking, if you will, from a quality perspective to all the new products that we're designing and that we're developing before we hand it off to the shop floor. And this goes back to teachings of Deming from years ago. All right, let's just not check the quality at the floor. Let's design it up front. So I think, in terms of what's in and what's out, there's a lot going on.
Excellent. And let's dive into what's in, because I think that as we've looked at various companies, we've found that if they're embracing what's in at a deeper level, they're getting more value out of the process.
I agree. So let's take them one at a time.
Yep.
Okay. Let's take it first of all from the what we're calling the process thinking. All right. Here, what we're talking about is putting more attention on where the processes take place. Again, instead of just the checklists. Okay, where is the process taking place? Where is it better served out on the shop floor and in the whole manufacturing process? All right. I also think that you need more engagement. All right, so that it doesn't become so cumbersome to the organization. If you are doing these things repeatedly, it becomes second nature, and it doesn't seem so cumbersome to get done.
Right.
It also means, however, if that's going to work, that we have to have a better understanding so that the people are logging on, logging off, are a part of the system. All right, and just like your production control system, they're logging in and on and off from a production job. Same thing has to take place from a quality perspective. If they do it every day, it'll become habit. It won't be as cumbersome. And the last piece there is you need to set objectives, okay? You need to make sure that what we're working on, the QMS, aligns itself with the other business processes and the overall direction of the company. And I think that has to be taken to a higher level and included. And that's what we're considering, if you will, the process thinking aspect. Okay.
You set up well for the next one. So what this whole topic of strategic thinking. So ISO focus on strategic thinking helps do what for companies?
Well, I think, when we say the word strategic, people think, oh my God, that's just the senior execs. Let's take it away from that for a moment and just say strategic thinking at a higher level that includes the quality focus in the organization up at that level in the same way we would do from a safety program or an ERP implementation, okay? In other words, it needs senior management involvement. It needs them actually looking at what has to get done. Likewise, we have to look at all of the risks and opportunities, all right, that exist within the QMS. So we can step back and say, all right, well, what if we do or don't take on that task from a quality perspective? This also then, if we want to get the benefit and you want to put it on your website, you got to say, what's the meaning to the customer? What's the value add for going through this process? Not just internally, okay, but what does that bring from a quality perspective to our customers? All right, and the last point there being that the organization needs to see ISO as integrated, okay, to what they do daily and not a separate program. Okay, it fits in just like HR and just like the other programs that we have within the organization. It's not something we look at separately. Okay, and I think the last piece there is also very important. Okay, the terminology. Okay, if we create common language that people understand, okay, then they'll use it on a regular basis. And I'm going to go back to safety. Okay, look at how much visibility our safety programs have gotten over the years. People don't even think about it anymore. They take breaks for their exercises. They talk about safety at the source. They talk about safety on a day-to-day basis. We need to talk about quality, okay, in that same way. And I think then, I think we'll move on to a higher level thinking in the organization, Andy.
Right. And that allows people to create all the activities of the organization that create value. Because some of the frustrated folks I've seen in quality see places that they can add value through the company, but because the process hasn't been implemented company-wide, it's not reaching the company that way.
Totally agree.
Which brings us to company-wide engagement. So what does company-wide ISO engagement mean or look like?
Well, I know it sounds redundant as you and I are going back and forth on this, but it's really trying to hammer home the point, okay? The first one is, that the system's been, so to speak, given the nod. In other words, it's something that senior management in the organization embraces, and everybody knows that it's been embraced. It's not just, it's not just a figure of speech. It's actually been, all right, grabbed on, and it becomes part of the organization, okay? Once again, people can speak QMS language, okay? They understand the terminology, all right? And they're using it day to day in meetings, all right, to talk about what's going on from a quality perspective, just like they would for health, safety, and everything else, and environmental, all right? once you start seeing that happen, what you will start also see is an improved communication, and both vertically and horizontally in the company as people are moving from meetings to meetings. And again, it becomes part of what's going on. Likewise, then, the different functional areas are also in step with what's going on with QMS. So we're not just talking about production for the day. We're not just talking about safety for the day. We're talking about what's going on from a quality perspective day to day. Not that people don't do that, but they don't do it with the ISO standard in mind. Yeah, we talk about how many got scrapped today. Okay, well, that's an ouch. But we don't talk about what the implications are, why it didn't happen. We don't do a root cause analysis. Okay? And the bottom line, I think, is if you look at it from that perspective and everybody wraps their arms around it, you'll find that it'll start to, it gets done, so to speak.
Right. And so this is another important topic that comes up. Design and development is in, and this is, having done a lot of work with software, really important to me with my folks. What are the implications of design and development being brought into the ISO standard?
Well, if you think about it, you walk into any organization and you walk over to the design engineers area, you'll see CAD CAM up on the screen, and these guys and gals are in there, designing away. Not that they don't have quality in mind, but the question you have to step back and ask yourself is, are these people familiar with the ISO standards? Do they know what they're adding to these documents, to the drawings, okay, that are necessary? So we don't have to go back afterwards, okay, and duplicate effort and add information we would normally put up front. That's one way of looking at it. All right, and the other thing is, can we design them better so that the ISO standards are included, that we're building quality into the design of the product? So there's two pieces here. There's design with quality in mind, but then there's also do the design process with the ISO standard in mind. And there's two different avenues there. And so I think this whole design and development, okay, needs to be included, okay, more so than even the production side, because production side, we're handing it off. These folks touch the product, if you will, before it even gets released. I think that's why it becomes very important.
Cool. So in terms of timelines, let's talk about that for a minute, because I think that's an open question. I know I've talked to some companies who have, quote unquote, already gone through the new certification, and they did it as a check the box and got absolutely no value out of the new standards. But let's talk about what this timeline looks like.
Well, if we step back for a moment, we are where we are today. If we look forward in time, there is a recertification deadline, and that is September of 2018, period. All right? And so there are a couple of milestones that I think have to be considered, even if you just step back in a very global perspective. There's a couple of things, all right? Somewhere between now and the next few months, if you want to stay on target, you need to take a step back and look at where you are and at least what are the implications of developing an implementation plan for the new ISO standard. All right? It's going to take a while to do that gap analysis, but it has to get done. Then there's a large, time expanse between that dot point and the next one, if you will, which is where, you finish the implementation, you ought to step back and go, okay, so did we make it? And if so, are we ready for certification? All right? And so, time's clicking. It's 2016. Soon it'll be 17 and 18. All right, so I have one word to say, and that's tempus fugit. Time is flying, and so you really need to step back and say, where are we, and can we make that deadline? I think that's a serious question people have to step back and ask, Andy.
Absolutely. And I think part of what we look at is, in our ISO Easy approach, is we try not to waste time. We try to cut through the issues and get to the point for clients, and keep them focused on really what their timeline is, because every client's going to be different and challenges are going to be different from that perspective. And
totally agree.
So, as we get back to the core material, let's cover some common concerns, because as we have gone out and talked to people about this, there's been a number of questions that have come up. So, some people have said, effectively, what's the fuss about? What's different with this new ISO 2015 standard?
Well, again, some of this is covering topics we've already covered, but it's worth repeating. Okay, this new standard puts a whole new emphasis at that strategic level at the risk management and clearly at the top management involvement. Okay? You know, if we were implementing or looking at implementing a brand new ERP system, okay, it would have the exact same requirements. And I think we have to step back and look at it from that perspective. It means we have potential new business processes we have to look at. We have to go through a gap analysis, all right? And we're going to have to take a look at, from moving from one system to another, okay, what changes have to take place. So likewise, okay, this is actually forcing us to grow up, if you will, all right, and actually get to the same level of robustness as we would if we were implementing an ERP system, okay? And I think the point made here is that if they actually embrace these, just like you would with an ERP system, okay, you get standardization, and you actually would get, okay, these business process improvements and financial results you should be looking for. So I think that's one of the key pieces there, Andy.
Right. I think that's really key. Is that and it's part of our whole ISO Easy approach. Is we're looking to go through the process to make sure that the clients are realizing that value and seeing that financial impact.
Right.
So another common concern is, you know, geez, I've already got a full quality department. Why can't I just leave it up to our existing management rep and the internal audit team? You know, maybe kick it up a little bit, but almost status quo.
Well, Andy, I hate to disagree with you, but I disagree. It can't stay there. And again, once you do that and you make the decision, okay, we're moving up to a new standard. Oh, and by the way, same old, you guys have it. Let us know when you're done. Then we have fallen right back into where we were with the old standard. Okay? You really have to take this and move it to a new direction and take it to another level. All right, if we pigeonhole it, that's exactly what will happen. It will get pigeonholed again. All right, so you have to implement this, you know, just like you would implement, again, NPI process or a new product introduction, if you will. All right, it has to be taken into the whole organization, and everybody has to be a player. Okay, again, this is not meant to be a program just for the quality department. How many times we have to harp on that? But I think that's the key point that has to be made. It's clear as day.
All right. Well, so even if I buy into what you just said, you know, as a company, we've got other strategic concerns and initiatives to deal with right now. And honestly, what company that we know doesn't have that going on? How do they approach this?
Well, Andy, I have facilitated a number of strategy workshops over the last few years. And in those workshops, we talk about what's the vision, what's the mission, you know, what's the goal of the company, where are we going? And quite frankly, the quality aspect of it and what is in the new standard must and should be involved in that entire process. All right. If we're going to take the organization from point A to point B, then from a strategic point of view, this has to be part of the process. Okay. It just has to be built in. And I believe this is the responsibility of the senior executives. All right. They need to be able to look at it from a bigger perspective and add that, you know, on the agenda, so it becomes part of the strategic initiatives. And just like we would take on any initiative that came out of a strategy session, okay, the ISO has to be a part of it, and we have to step back and look at what resources we need, how long it's going to take, and who has to be involved. And it'll be no different than adding another piece of capital equipment, or expanding our business, or creating a new go-to-market strategy. I think this all has to be included.
I think you're right. The challenge that brings up is, so how's this going to impact my bottom line?
Well, I think, what if we look at it this way, Andy? What if we said, you know, this is no different than any other continuous improvement initiative, okay? What are our expectations out of a Kaizen for a setup or changeover improvement? We have very specific goals and objectives when we run those Kaizens. We expect either a cost savings, a time savings. You know, let's go back to our lean manufacturing. All right, so the same thing ought to be looked at from this quality initiative. All right, we're looking for improvements that are going to affect the bottom line. So how do they affect it? Well, there's the cost of implementing this, but then there's also the cost savings and the cost drivers, all right, that are implicit in implementing a good quality management system. And I think that's where people have to look at this. All right, if we look at it as that, a continuation of my continuous improvement process, not a separate entity, I think they might start looking at it differently and give it a little bit more focus.
So this probably ties into, if this is a strategic initiative and the right objectives are set up, then this new standard has benefit for the entire corporation.
Oh, definitely.
Yep.
Definitely.
Yep. So, kind of, again, sort of another question that we've heard. So we meet on ISO once a year for the management review. This is kind of the check the box. Isn't that sufficient?
Well, let's continue with the conversation from the previous couple of slides here, Andy. The answer to the question is no, it's not. Okay, just likewise, I wouldn't measure how many safety incidents that we have and only bring that up once a year. Okay, that's an ongoing process to make sure our employees are safe on a regular basis. Okay, same thing with environmental issues if we have any with our plant where it is. So the same thing here for the QMS. Okay, in this ISO standard, we ought to make it an integral part of our either weekly or monthly meetings. All right, with somebody responsible for bringing the information up. This is where we are. This is how we're doing, just like we would with any other initiative. Okay. In fact, I like using the DMAIC process, which comes out of our lean training, if you will. Define, measure, analyze, implement, control. Each one of the elements of the standards that we're trying to implement can fall into that same process. Okay. So I think if we look at it from that perspective, on a monthly basis, we can track how we're doing. In fact, we should be tracking this whole transition from the old standard to the new standard. And then obviously once we're in the new standard, we're tracking to it in the same way. So, meeting once a year before was good because we check off the box. That's not acceptable anymore going forward, Andy. It just won't be acceptable.
So we've got to change the language. We've got to change the involvement in order to create this effective throughout the entire organization.
Yeah, and by the way, Andy, if you remember early on in one of the slides, we said you had to demonstrate, certain aspects. So you're going to have to demonstrate that you've had more than the one meeting.
Right.
There's got to be some notes. There's got to be minutes of the meeting. So that's got to all be in there.
And kind of the same, along the same vein, but I've seen some places where this might make sense, maybe not. So there's a view that, hey, if we do ISO right, it belongs on the operational side of the business. But how does ISO impact the strategy of my business long term? Isn't ISO, by getting involved in strategy, sort of fragmenting their own standards?
No, actually, I see it just the opposite, Andy. I apologize, but I see this helping to pull it together. And again, I'll go back to what I said earlier, and bringing this up to a more strategic level. I look at the world this way. We have strategy, we have tactics, and then we have tools. And every single one of the key elements of running a manufacturing company, has elements in each of those three different categories. So by raising this whole quality standard and quality focus up to the strategic level, it allows the senior management team to give it that focus, direction, and resources it needs to get done. And I think that's key. All right. It then helps them define what are the tactical steps, and individual initiatives that have to get accomplished over a specific timeline with specific measures. All right. And then the last line is what tools? What tools does the team need to make sure that not only can they get it implemented, but they can also maintain it? So if we look at the ERP system, if we look at our production system, we look at our ERP system that way, then I think we need to step back and look at the QMS in that exact same light. QMS is not a module that's a part of the ERP system, It's integral to the processes that we have to implement. And I think that's the key, that integration, all right, and organizational development around the system. And I think that's key.
Yep. So the last comment we've heard from people, which is, I'm sure you'll help us understand this better, but people have said, hey, we've got plenty of time and we've got a great QMS group. We can make this easy to do in a short period of time.
Well, unless you've got a ton of resources, this is not one of those things that's one and done, and that if we throw enough resources, we can just overcome the mountain, if you will. I think that you need to step back. I think the organization needs to step back and say, look, if we want to have a good quality management system, then number one, this transition from the strategy down to tactics and tools has to be taken into consideration. And again, going back to an earlier comment, if you've got a lot on your plate, this can just add more to the plate. So it really has to be considered. All right. The other thing here is that end game, okay, of September 2018 is not going to move. And the last thing you want to do is almost get to the finish line and then have to wait, okay, to get someone out to validate that you've actually made the changes. All right? You've got 24 months, and there's a lot of resources that are going to be required. And again, you can't just say I'm going to take 2 or 3 quality folks and have them do this. As you look at what it's going to take to implement the new system, the new standards, there's more people that have to get involved. And everybody's got lots of things on their plate from other projects. So you really need to take a look at this. What it really means is the sooner you can do a gap analysis to weigh in on where you are today, figure out where you need to be by when, and put a timeline in place, okay, the better off you're going to be. All right? You'll understand where your shortfalls are, what resources you're going to need, and what effort's going to be needed from the whole organization. And that has to get done. And again, there's only 24 months left there, Andy.
Yeah, it's a tough challenge. So let's bring up a couple examples of how ISO Easy can help people avoid fires by looking at some of the new standards. So, we've heard a couple interesting things in the past year. So we've heard of the fires with these hoverboards. So the question would be, would a vendor risk assessment have helped eliminate some of these disasters? And I think as you take a look at it, the risk management specified in ISO 9001:2015 would really have helped avoid that situation. Then you move into the whole, very recent issue of the Samsung 7 fires. Would that have benefited from a complete integration of an ISO 9001:2015 standard? And design and development is now part of the scope, so those issues would have been identified up front and carried through the entire process.
You would certainly hope so, Andy. You would certainly hope so.
So one of the things that we're looking to do is to try to help people reframe their ISO thinking with ISO Easy. So we don't want to have this go from check this old group of boxes under 2008 to check the new bunch of boxes under 2015 and not really get value out of it. So we're looking to help reframe their thinking with our whole way and approach. Want to talk about some of the key topics there?
Yeah, no problem, Andy. I said, well, first of all, we've used the word strategic enough in this conversation, all right? And if you've not thought strategically before, I say, especially with this topic, then obviously there's a transition. So what we want to be able to do is help organizations transition this so it gets to that strategic level in the thinking process, right? We talked about continuous improvement. Well, how do you integrate ISO? Okay, so it's not, again, just stuck in the quality department. Last piece, if you've not done engagement, all right, you've not been through a whole lean implementation or ERP implementation as of late, all right, then how do I reach out to the rest of the organization and get them involved in the ISO program? And the last piece then is, all right, I really need to show value for this. I realize that I got to get there, all right, but how do I actually measure and bring true value and bottom line improvements to the organization if I'm going to go down this path? I need to show that up front if at all possible. So those are some of the things, we're trying to do with the ISO Easy approach, if you will. Mm-hmm. All right?
Yep, and so this theme of reframing, if we take a look at ISO 9001:2015, there's definitive time and value benefits, specifically the conformity to a specified QMS system requirements under the standard, risk analysis and opportunities associated with its context and objectives, the consistent delivery of products and services that meet customer and regulatory and statutory requirements, and it helps identify opportunities to enhance customer satisfaction. So the whole goal is to help deliver organizational engagement that delivers real value. So as we look at this, let's go back to that timeline and maybe dig a little bit deeper into that. So we've got the recertification deadline. What are your further thoughts on that?
Okay, so let's add a couple of dot points on here. All right, so we said where we are today. We've had we'll say by December or so having that gap done. What that also means then is that somewhere by September of next year, of 2017, you really should have upgraded, if you will, to the new QMS standard, if at all possible. All right? And so you have to have an implementation process in place. At least you know where you're going to be. And so that you're ready for some sort of a review, let's say by March of 2018, okay? And then give yourself some time, because there's going to be some time involved to make sure everything's in place. You should think about an upgrade audit somewhere around June to see if you're ready, and then clearly get ready for your certification, okay, by 2018. What that means then is that you need to have a couple of things done. One, right up front, need a gap analysis, and that's one of the first things that needs to get done. So you can tell where you are right now. You can look at the timeline and assess, okay, what efforts we really need to put into place. The next thing is there has to be some training. All right, you just can't go through an implementation. You've got to step back and do company-wide training and awareness, so you can talk about what's going to take to upgrade to the existing, upgrade the existing QMS to the next level. From September of 17 to March of 2018, give yourselves a good 6 months or so to implement some of these internal changes that have to take place, okay, and confirm that you're ready for the audit. Next, leave some time for corrective actions. All right, assume that once you've gone through that internal audit, that review, that you're going to find some changes that need to be made. So give yourselves a few months to make those changes. All right, so that by June thereabouts, all right, you're ready. And last but not least, put a buffer in. Whether it's 2, 3, 4 months, whatever you can afford in the project plan, just to make sure that you're ready for that deadline of September 2018. So I think, if we step back, I think one of the key things here, Andy, is it's not a marathon. I mean, it is a marathon. It's not a sprint. So you really need to pace yourself on this thing. You need to get ready for it. And quite frankly, we'd like to be able to coach everybody that's on the call today.
Excellent, thank you. It's interesting, as we went through that timeline, somebody was sitting here next to me almost, looking at those dates, realizing that their dates are going to be earlier than that, and like saying, oh, what do we have to do? So I think it's a really important thing to take a look at. So how can we help? As we look at the ISO Easy approach, we've got a number of tools that we can use to help people: gap analysis, training and coaching, facilitation, assessments, documentation, implementation. We can do this either online or on site, anywhere from the executive through the shop floor, and on a part-time or full-time or virtual basis per se. And our goal is to help our clients reframe ISO 9001 the ISO Easy way. So let's talk a little bit about maybe how we, that's kind of the tools in our toolbox. Let's talk about how we design this approach. Make sense?
Yeah, go for it, Andy.
All right, so we decided as we built this whole tool set that we wanted the whole approach to be complementary, integrated, user-friendly, and dynamic. And so what was interesting is I think we heard some of the ISO experts, arguing about 27 different definitions. That doesn't do companies any good. We wanted tools that were complementary and procedures and training that work with their processes in a systematic and cost-effective way. We wanted the solution to be integrated to make sure that we're driving value from the leadership and through all the functional areas of the organization. We wanted to make sure it was user-friendly. So while the process is developed by operation, compliance, and educators, it's a complete solution, and we wanted it to be dynamic. So there's not a one-size-fits-all approach. We wanted it to be an approach that allows each company to maximize their business potential and positions the organization for audit success and, more importantly, value delivery.
That's a mouthful, Andy.
It is. So, next steps.
Well, before you jump, I take a step back here and sort of summarize what we've been through with the group today. Mm-hmm. I think if you look back and you read through the progression of thought and thinking as in this presentation, I think everybody who's looking at this should at least have a clear understanding of change is necessary. I think that's, that goes with any system implementation, but more so here, because people are used to doing the standards. They're going to say, oh, well, we can just do it the way we used to. And I think that's the catchphrase that we have to somehow avoid. We've done it before. do it the same way. And I think that this is what's the biggest difference here. Okay, we've created a process, Andy, that will help people get over that. But I think that's the biggest hurdle. Okay, most of the people listening to this presentation have to get over. Okay, so before we even jump to next steps, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Okay, I think that from a personal perspective, we've covered an awful lot of information. You're probably going to have to listen to this a couple of times and do some research. But I think you'll find it is achievable, but you've got to follow the process. And so on that note then, Andy, so what are the next steps for everybody?
Easy. So if anybody has any questions, they can email us, and we've got an easy email address for you to remember, which is reframe@isoeasy.com. We can help you reframe your ISO 9001 2015 approach, the ISO Easy way. And then we'd be happy to schedule a 1-hour discovery call. Let's get on the phone with you, see where you are, understand where you are in the process, and see how we can help you. And, Harold, thank you so much for your time today, and everybody on the call. We appreciate your time, and we look forward to supporting you reframing ISO 9001 the ISO Easy way.
Thank you, Andy. Have an awesome day.
Thanks, you too.